Morning, everyone. This is Andrew Gross. I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Israel Commission. And as such, I'm overseeing the state of New Jersey's relations with the great state of Israel. And I want to welcome you all to what is going to be really a fantastic program this morning on the work from home revolution, real estate market implications in the post-COVID-19 era. And I'm really excited about this program. My commission, which is the largest commission of the state of New Jersey, under the New Jersey Department of State, is, as I said, overseeing all aspects of the relationship between New Jersey and Israel. And one of the areas that we really try to focus on, besides just economic relations and business, which is so important in a $1.3 billion bilateral relationship, is how do we improve quality of life? And how do we bring great thought leadership between from Israel to New Jersey and both from New Jersey to Israel? And today's program is another exciting and amazing example of that. And as so many people are joining, I'm seeing friends both in Israel and New Jersey who are coming online, and I'm so glad that we have such a great group this morning to listen to our program. I want to begin by thanking Professor Mo Davis, my friend Deb Tantleff, of course, Professor Ben Shahar in Israel and his incredible team at the Al Rav Institute. Of course, Ralph Zucker, who we're going to hear from later on, who is a member of the New Jersey Israel Commission, along with Deb Tantleff, who we'll hear from momentarily. And what we're doing here this morning is hearing incredible knowledge and strengthening the partnership between New Jersey and Israel in a very important economic sector and in an area that, as we know, is changing rapidly. So I am hopeful that the insights that we gain from today's discussion will help to drive a brighter future in our real estate industries in both locations. Again, I think this is a great goal of the New Jersey-Israel relationship to deepen understanding in areas like this, to deepen academic and intellectual knowledge and sharing. And specifically, I am so proud that this program is happening under the auspices of both Tel Aviv University and Rutgers University, which have really established an incredible working relationship. It stems from the visit of Governor Murphy to Israel in 2018. It was his first overseas visit, and it is a relationship that the state of New Jersey is extremely proud of, and we take great pride in deepening this important strategic relationship, again, not just between partners, but between incredible academic institutions. So I want to conclude again by thanking you all, welcoming you all, whether you're in Israel or New Jersey, and welcoming you, please, to the great state of New Jersey, encouraging you to come do business here, work with us. And I encourage you to reach out to me, and I'm available. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can reach out through our organizers who invited you. And I turn it over to my great friend, Deb Tantleff, to take it away from here. Deb, good morning.
Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here. I was trying to think of something really profound to say this morning, and there really isn't. All I could think of is in the last intensity of the last couple of weeks that most of us have been experiencing, I had an extraordinary amount of pride in the personal relationship that we've been able to cultivate at Rutgers with our colleagues over in Tel Aviv and at the Institute. And it's really nice to have friends and family on the other side of the world that we can exchange ideas with. As a business owner and as a developer, I've spent a lot of time trying to get my head around what COVID has done. And I would be the first to say that I've always taken the position COVID hasn't done anything that wasn't happening in the marketplace before. It's just been accelerating a number of trends, and it's a question of who was really paying attention to what trend. And so I think we've really compiled an extraordinary group of thought leaders today to really talk about some of the nuances that are going to manifest as a result of the work from home experience that we've all had in light of COVID and the pandemic that we've all just come through. And I think we're all going to come out of this forum thinking a little bit differently in terms of how we function as individuals, how we function as groups, and what that means for us as business professionals. And I really look forward to connecting with more of my counterparts in Israel and sharing our experiences. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Morris Davis, who's our academic director at the Center for Real Estate. Morris is a longtime friend. We do a lot of brainstorming together, and I know he loves this data. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Morris and let him go through his phenomenal presentation.
Well, thanks for that lovely introduction. It's great to be talking about working from home while working at home. So let me just get straight to the point. And let me start my timer so that I've got 10 minutes. So some notes on working from home, written while working from home. And what I'm going to do is summarize the research about working from home as a way for us to think about how we think trends will change. So this is 3 parts. And the first part is what can be done at home and by whom. And most of the slides here will be synopses of the Dingle and Neumann paper, How Many Jobs Can Be Done at Home, which was recently published. So Dingle and Neumann estimate that 37% of jobs in the United States can be performed entirely at home, with significant variation across cities and industries. And these jobs typically pay more than jobs that cannot be done at home and account for 46% of all US wages. Now, I view this as an upper bound, this 37% of jobs, because of the way the questions are asked to get at that. For example, one of their questions is like, do you routinely get stung by bees or insects? And if you answer yes, then your job cannot be done at home. So if you view this as an upper bound, it's still a large upper bound. And what I've graphed here, this is a graph from Dingle and Neumann. It shows both some categories and categories of employment. So up here, there's computing and mathematical. Down here, there's food preparation. On the y-axis, there's median hourly wage. So going from 0 to 60, and this is in US dollars per hour. And then on the x-axis is the share of the jobs in that industry that can be done at home. So one of the takeaways from this graph is that even food preparation, well, there's a bunch of jobs here where almost none of the jobs can be done at home. Healthcare practitioners down to food preparation, but personal care, sales, about a quarter of the jobs, even in those industries, can be done at home. And then in the higher wage industries, like legal, management, computing, mathematical, more than 30% of those jobs can be done at home. So first, there's an increasing relationship with wages and share of jobs that can be done at home. There's a large set of relatively low-paying jobs that cannot be done at home, and a small but important set of jobs where many of the jobs can be done almost entirely at home. These are tables. I don't expect you to read them. There won't be a quiz later, but what they show is that the percentage of jobs that can be done at home varies not only by industry, for example, educational services, 83% of the jobs can be done at home. Yeah, don't tell that to the students who've been taking online classes. But since each metro area in the United States has a varying composition of these industries, you can actually rank metro areas by the share of the jobs in those metro areas that can be done at home. San Jose is at the top at 50%, and Cape Coral, Fort Myers, I don't even know what's there. But anyway, only 28% of the jobs can be done at home. I guess maybe hanging out at the beach is something you can't do at home. Anyway, I'm not going to go through this. These slides will be made available if you want them. This is a color coding map of share of jobs that can be done at home by zip code or county. I think it's either zip code or county. Okay, so lots of jobs can be done at home. Are we going to do them at home? So the next set of slides is from a paper by Nick Bloom, Jose Barrera, and Stephen Davis they crafted their own survey of 30,000 people. And they asked a bunch of questions from that survey about working from home. So this starts out pre-pandemic, then to pandemic, and then it asks, what do you expect to have happen after the pandemic? So obviously the share of jobs increased by a lot at the pandemic. What I want to focus on is what will happen pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic. They estimate pre-pandemic 5% of jobs can be done at home. And they're saying employers, or survey respondents, expect that employers will allow more than 20% of their time to be spent at home. So 5% to more than 20. In other words, a fourfold increase in time worked from home pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. So even though 5 sounds like a small number and 20 sounds like a less small number, an increase from 5 to 20 is a big increase. That's not just the US. So if you ask, there's another survey of employers, directed survey of employers in Norway and Sweden. And we all know that the Norwegians and the Swedes never lie. And what do they think? Well, they think pre-pandemic, 10% of time was spent working at home. Post-pandemic, 30% of time. They expect 30% of time to work from home. So then in these Scandinavian countries, they're expecting a threefold increase in time spent working at home. These survey data also show that time spent working from home is increasing in wages. So all workers in their survey want to work at least 40% from home, and some more than 50% from home. And the question is, how often would you like to have paid work days at home? Again, so all workers at least 43, and the higher skill workers more than 50. Now, does that align with what employees think employers will allow? Well, for lower skill workers, no. Lower skill or lower wage workers, the answer is like 16% at home. But yeah, it kind of does for high skill workers. 41% of time for the highest paid workers. People think their employers will allow them to work at home 40% of the time. So these are huge changes. This shows the same data, but in a graphical form. So, okay, are we still going to be made, do we still get shunned and shamed if we work from home? And associated with these large planned changes is a change in the perception about, are people slacking when they work from home? So this is question, how have perceptions about working from home changed among people you know? And almost, of course, there's a large mass at no change. There's a few people that say, yeah, it's gotten worse. My perceptions fell. I don't know who those people are. Maybe those are the students who hate online classes. But everyone else says, yeah, working from home is improved some, improved among most, or improved among all. So yeah, working from home, people are more willing to say it's not that bad a thing. Additionally, they've asked, how does your efficiency working from home during the pandemic compare to your efficiency working at the office before the pandemic? So are people playing solitaire at home, whereas at the office, they were working machines? So actually what people say is, no, my productivity is about the same. There are a large set of people that said my productivity is higher at home. And I understand that. That's 40% of respondents. And then there are a small number of respondents that say, actually, I work better at the office. And then finally, what do we expect to have happen to urban form in real estate? So I'm not going to interpret this graph for you. There's obviously 4 lines that point up. Let me just state that in a paper I have with my colleagues, Andre Gant and Jesse Gregory, we just document that the share of time that you spend working at home increases with your commute time. Perhaps that's not a surprise. Either way, we don't know which way the causality goes in this picture, but either way, it's possible that as people expect to work more at home, they're also going to be willing to have longer commutes. So it's possible the correlation will go, hey, I'm going to work from home more, I'm willing to take a longer commute. And what does that mean for urban form? Well, we're already sort of seeing it in migration data. So these are graphs here of movers. And we know the data on movers from the US Post Office change of address forms. So anything in red shows out-migration during COVID. Anything in green shows in-migration during COVID. And what you can see now, we all know that people fled New York City, but these patterns tend to be true across the large metro areas in the United States. People left the center of the town, and then they went to the suburbs. And you get a larger snapshot of New York City here. So again, this was during the pandemic. It was from movement from February 2020 to February 2021. Will it unwind once we all feel completely safe? Possibly. Or is this presage of things, is this something permanent? People are now expecting to work at home more, and these migration patterns are consistent with that. Also consistent with that is housing prices. This is density here. So in the center city, you're in the most dense, and in the suburbs, you're in the less dense. And this shows percent change in house prices, and this shows the percent change in population. House prices increased more in the less dense areas of metros than in the more dense areas, and population increased more or didn't fall as rapidly in the less dense area of metros than in the more dense areas. And here's my summary. Working from home appears to be here to stay. The percentage of workers that can work from home is high, and it's increasing in education and wages. Employers and employees expect a huge increase in working from home. Something like time spent working from home will increase by a factor of 3 or 4 from pre-COVID times to post-COVID times. Why do we believe this? Stigma of working from home has fallen, and working from home productivity is viewed by many as favorably compared to the office. Impact on cities and urban form, which is the rest of this session. Well, it's unclear if the superstar metro areas will be less important going forward. And that I mean Boston, New York, San Francisco, and Tel Aviv. This would, if the superstar metro areas would be less important, say, that would unwind trends that began in the 50s and accelerated in the 90s. Sorry, can you please mute your line, please? Thank you. This would have to unwind trends that have been accelerating since the 90s. And we do have credible estimates that people will need to work at the office at least some of the time. But then if the suburbs are more important than they used to be, will the center city, and the center city is less, what will happen? Center city employment is going to fall, and retail near center city employment will fall. There is and should be a continued boom in suburban house prices and construction. People are going to need more space to work at home, and that's consistent with a boom in the suburbs and people building out their houses. CBD office and retail rents should fall. It's unclear if suburban office will come back. I think the answer is going to be yes, but we'll see if that happens. And I believe Ralph can tell us. And then finally, we expect rents to fall. So in the center city office, that's because center city office is hard to convert to residential. I'm done. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Morris. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Danny to give us a little context about what this means for the housing trends that we're experiencing, because I think we've all learned to appreciate the nuances and the quirks of our homes a lot more as we've spent a lot of time in them. Danny?
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Morris, for your introduction. I think I'm going to read out evidence, some of the evidence that you presented. Let me very briefly summarize what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to show some indications of changes in consumer taste for residential real estate in the post-COVID-19 period. And specifically, as you will see, I will touch upon density and housing side. I should say already right away that the changes that we see, and by the way, I'm going to show you some outcomes which are not based on surveys, but rather actual behavior in the market, the changes that we find, at least up to now, are not dramatic. At the same time, since we're talking about COVID-19 effects, I'm going to talk a little bit about the local Israeli macroeconomic policy effects of different measures that took place after the outbreak of COVID-19 and that apply to the market today. I'm going to talk a little bit and show evidence about considerable shortage of supply of new construction and land for development in the coming future. I'm going to touch upon the insufficient redevelopment projects in Israel. And finally, as I mentioned, policy measures that increase housing demand beyond the natural growth, or that is to say, increase the discrepancy between demand and supply beyond what we need or what we want to see in order to stabilize prices in the market. This altogether would support, unfortunately, if continued as is, the continuing rise of housing prices in Israel. So as promised, here is some evidence, what I call signs for change in taste for residential real estate in the post-COVID-19 period. And this is based on some preliminary outcomes from a joint work with Roni Golan and Tur Somerville, where we based our analysis and data from January 2016, so this starts pre-COVID, all the way up to April 2021. So this is more than 1 year into COVID in Israel. And we're looking at, in this study, we're looking at the universe of all housing transactions in Israel. This is about 350,000 observations over that period, about which 1/5 to 1/4, 22% are transactions that took place after the outbreak of COVID-19 in Israel. What you see here is the share of housing transactions by housing density. So on the x-axis, on the left-hand side, are the least dense areas. On the right-hand side are the most dense areas. You can see that there is an increase in the share of transactions. If we count the number of transactions and we divide the number of transactions out of the total transactions in a market, we see that there is some increase in the share of transactions in the least dense areas, and there is a decrease in the share of transactions in the denser areas. The numbers are not dramatic, but these are macro numbers, and they're obviously statistically significant, these changes. How about the share of housing transactions by distance from Tel Aviv? So Tel Aviv was mentioned by Morris. This is maybe one of the superstar city of Israel. So if we look at number of transactions as distance from the central business district of Tel Aviv, we see that on the left-hand side, on the x-axis, these are the areas closer to Tel Aviv. On the right-hand side, these are the farther away from Tel Aviv. The numbers here are in kilometers. So we see that there is some increase in the share of transactions that take place around 30 to 60 kilometers from Tel Aviv. So this is some sign for increased transactions farther away from Tel Aviv as opposed to 10 to 30 kilometers from Tel Aviv. However, within Tel Aviv, and I think this is consistent with what Morris just mentioned, within Tel Aviv, we see that the amenities of Tel Aviv are still attractive, and we don't see any significant change in the number of transactions in Tel Aviv. How about the final aspect that we are looking at among the variables is the share of housing transactions by housing size. So there are a lot of talks about people needing or demanding units that are somewhat greater than what they used to demand in the past. And the x-axis here, you see the size of the units by square meter. You can multiply it by about 10.7 to get it into square feet. So we see that the small apartments on the left-hand side, there is decreased demand in terms of number of transactions, decreased demand for small apartments. On the other hand, there is somewhat an increase in demand for the larger size, 100 to 150 square meter units. So these are actual transactions and actual share of number of transactions. Is it reflected in prices in any way? So if we control, and I'm not gonna bother you too much with the statistical issues here, but just to mention that we control for the asset characteristics and the locations here. And what we see is that pre-outbreak of COVID-19, if we focus on density, before the outbreak, if you increase the density by 1,000 units per square kilometer, this would have had a positive effect on prices on the margin, about 0.5%, 0.46% for any 1,000 additional units. So people generally are attracted to more dense areas. However, we see that post-outbreak, the outbreak of the pandemic, this number is still positive. However, it's significantly smaller, and it decreased in percentage. In basis point, it decreased by about 33 basis points, but in percentage, it's a very significant change. So there is a shift in attraction to less dense areas. What about size of the unit? If pre-pandemic, we saw that 1% increase in size of the unit would have increased the cost, the price of the unit by about 0.41% for every 1% increase in the size. We see that there is a slight change. This change is significant statistically, but it's not economically, it's not a very big change towards attraction or demand for bigger units, and people are willing to pay a little bit more for the bigger units. What about distance from Tel Aviv? Consistent with what I showed you before with respect to the number of transactions, we see that people are still very attracted to live in Tel Aviv, and the amenities of Tel Aviv are still an attraction. And in fact, we find that getting a 1 kilometer increase in the distance from Tel Aviv not only decreases prices before the pandemic, it also decreases prices and even a little bit more than what it used to decrease the prices in the post-outbreak of the COVID-19 in Israel. Let me, before I end my short talk, let me just say a few words about the Israel housing market price trend in the post-COVID period. This is just a background. You can see here the price in 2021, the first quarter of 2021, of what we call in Israel a 4-room apartment, or what is referred to in the US as a 3-bedroom condo. So this is the price in US dollars on the y-axis. As you get farther away from Tel Aviv, you see, just as a background, the prices in Tel Aviv are over $1 million for the typical 3-bedroom condo. And it steeply decreases as you get farther away, even 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, it's already a much lower price. By the way, the king here up here is Jerusalem, which is about 50 to 55 kilometers from Tel Aviv. How prices behave when you get farther from Tel Aviv. One important change that happened in the local housing market was the ease of regulation set by the central bank on the ARM component, the adjustable rate component of the mortgage. Let me remind the American audience here that in Israel, households typically take mortgages that combine the same mortgage, combine both adjustable rate and fixed rate components. What we see in the orange line is the average fixed rate mortgage. In the blue line, we see the average ARM, adjustable rate mortgage. We see this along the period from the beginning of the decade 2011 to 2021 last quarter. And the gray line is the typical mortgage rate when people combine the two mortgages. What happened recently is that the central bank eased the regulation with respect to the adjustable rate component, allowing households to increase the share of the adjustable rate component in their mortgage. Altogether, this brought to a very dramatic change in the typical mortgage, dropping by about 56 basis points. And in terms of the rate today, this is a dramatic change, and making in this way making the mortgage much cheaper for local households. And obviously, this has a strong demand effect. In addition to that, due to the ease of that regulation and the cheaper mortgages, households can, I'm sorry, I can't see the slide. Yes, the households are required, when they enter the market, are required to bring what we say a lower down payment in order to get into the market, because their mortgage is cheaper. They don't have to pay that much on the mortgage in order to repay, and without crossing the 30% threshold of repayment to income, which allows households to actually decrease the amount of down payment that they need to bring when they get into the housing market. And this decrease you can see here is about $20,000. By the way, all US dollars here are translated from 3.3 shekels. So this is a quite a dramatic change in the requirement for down payment in the market. If I add to this what I just mentioned, the 56% basis point decrease in interest rate and the lower down payment, if we add to this another step that has been adopted recently, which is the decrease in the purchase tax on residential real estate investors, that came down from 8 to 10% to largely 5 to 7%, and reattract investors to the market in recent months, and once again increases demand. And finally, if we go to the supply side, where we see that there is a significant decrease in housing construction starts and marketing of land for construction since the outbreak of the pandemic, and this is under the authority of the Israel Land Authority that monopolized land in Israel. So on one hand, we see increased demand in the market. On the other hand, we see decreased supply that would materialize in the coming months. Altogether, this generates excess housing demand that is not supported by new supply, leading to continued rise in housing prices. And let me just end my talk with what citation from Case and Schiller, 2003, a famous paper by the two economists. And I think that what they talk about here very much applies to the Israeli, especially within the housing market environment nowadays. And what they say is that excessive public expectations, and they refer to housing bubbles in general, they say excessive public expectations of future price increases cause prices to be temporarily elevated. And during a housing price bubble, they say, home buyers think that a home that they would normally consider too expensive for them is now an acceptable purchase because they will be compensated by significant further price increase. And I think these voices are heard very much in conversations here in Israel. And above them, moreover, First-time home buyers, they say, may also worry during a housing bubble that if they do not buy now, they will not be able to afford a home later. And I think this notion very much persists in Israel, and in a way, these expectations for a future price increase are self-fulfilled currently in the market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. So I have a lot of reaction to your presentation. My initial one being you could have been talking about New Jersey, except that in New Jersey, the first-time home buyer is completely priced out of the market because right now it's really just a function of all cash buyers who don't need contingencies and can close really quickly. So our housing market is booming and is on fire, and concerningly so with the shortage that we have. I'd like to flip it back to Rachel, who I did not know lived in New Jersey at one point. That was a nice fun fact to learn this morning. Rachel, I'm going to admit that the article that I read that published some information on your study was really the genesis of this group deciding that this would be the discussion of our forum this time. This is our second event. We will be doing more. But some of the research that you've done was a really interesting conversation that the center and the Olive Institute had together. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Deborah said, I lived 4 years in New Jersey in the past, and I was very, very excited to be invited to this conference. I will introduce the work from home revolution during COVID, the Israeli case. The fact that I lived in South Jersey gave me the reminder to talk with my friend from Voorhees. She's a working from home mom during COVID that got back to work from her workplace just recently. Almost 6,000 miles make no difference. Similar advantages and similar challenges. The COVID-19 crisis has accelerated processes that were expected to take years all over the world. Among them, the transition to work from home. In fact, workers and employers were forced to change their working habits as they had to adjust to a whole new work environment. It meant a remote contact with their employees, colleagues, and managers, a different physical conditions, such as lack of equipment or children in the house, and so on. But there are also many advantages in this form of work. The workers enjoy greater flexibility in their work hours that helps improve their work-life balance. They can manage their own time and save time on commuting. The employers can benefit from reducing their business expenses, such as energy, office supply, and travel costs. Plus, they gain happier, satisfied, and more productive employees. Research is done before COVID show positive association between work from home and production. More than that, adapting this form of work expands recruiting opportunities for employers, while people from faraway places have a better chance to find a job. At the end of the day, all relevant players win. So are the residents that benefit from hopefully reduction of road traffic, leading to a better environment when air and noise pollution are mitigated. And of course, from real estate point of view, office buildings can be converted to residential buildings, also in economic and environmental interests. Working from home, we can find many advantages as well as many challenges. This last year, working from home myself, I studied trends in this form of work, having a nice breakfast. I'm talking 2 eggs over easy, and having my family around me, well, for better and for worse. On the other hand, my Zoom meetings were suddenly turned off. I felt more distanced from people of my organization, no more hallway small talks. I truly practiced what I was studying. In the next 10 minutes, I will introduce the work from home revolution in Israel, how it varies, what are some of the challenges, and to what extent they are being approached. Most of the findings are based on surveys conducted by Israel Democracy Institute, unless stated otherwise. But first, let's see to what extent was working from home in Israel before COVID. The Central Bureau of Statistics Social Survey indicates that only 0.4% of the workers and 22% of self-employed were working only from home in 2019. When we asked in our surveys during the pandemic, from where did you work before the crisis, 9% answered that they worked from home or combined work from home with the workplace. At the end of 2019, we conducted a work-life balance survey, and in this context, only 5% of the workers said that they had the flexibility to decide regarding working from home or not. The first case of COVID-19 in Israel was found at the end of February 2020. On March, when the first lockdown was imposed, there was an immediate rise when 53% of workers worked from home or combined work from home. Later on the second half of 2020, about 43 to 45% were working from home. In April, just last month, this rate came down to 34%. I think that this figure represents going back to normal routine, along with a significant residual of the crisis. A study published in July 2020 found a positive association between working from home and the country's GDP per capita. It's not surprising that the higher the percentage of workers without access to internet, the lower the percentage of those working from home. In Israel, 40% of jobs can be done remotely, when average of countries with high GDP is 38%. Among other things, the pandemic exposed gaps in the ability to work from home. In this graph, we can see the high percentage of workers that worked from home in the high-tech and insurance and financial services. This is as opposed to a low percentage of workers in retail or non-elite industries. During this crisis, if you couldn't work from home and your business was not able to function regularly, it meant that you were out of work. While the Central Bureau of Statistics surveys questioned the private sector's employers, our surveys addressed the employee from all sectors. We can see the percentage of work from home among the public sector's worker is fairly low, 33 to 38% compared to 43 to 46 in the private sector and about 70% in high tech. It also seems that if you worked in a large firm, your occupational status was better. On March, an average of 24% worked from home in a large business, as opposed to only 11% in small businesses. Furthermore, workers with an academic degree or technological education enjoyed a higher level of job security. Obviously, there is a better chance to work from home in professions that can be carried out remotely. And as higher the education, the percentage of working from home workers is also higher. In addition, and not surprisingly, there is a positive association between income level and the possibility to work from home. Last December, only 35% of low-income workers worked from home, compared to 66% of high-income workers. The surveys also revealed that with comparison to Tel Aviv area, a lower percentage of workers from the periphery worked from home. This gap may be linked to the fact that residents in the periphery are more likely to be employed in blue-collar occupations with limited opportunity to work from home. However, there is a potential for a positive process as a population with a high ability to work from home will move to distant places and contribute to strengthen the periphery. Well, it's a hope. Working from home requires adjustment to a different work environment. The workers have to, I'll say, switch mode. When we go to work, we go through a process. We get dressed, we take our bags, usually get into a car and drive. Many things are changed, physically changed. When we stay home, it's difficult because the change is abstract. We need to create it. If we fail, it can harm our efficiency at work. In December, very similar to June's finding, 64% of women reported high or very high efficiency of their work at home, compared with 51% of men. But the challenges are greater when pandemic is involved and the children at home are part of the package. Trying to work efficiently and without distractions or interruptions was almost impossible for parents with young children. The responses to the July and December surveys indicate that the presence of children at home had a negative effect. In December, 81% of men and 70% of women reported that their work at home had suffered as a result of having children around. Other challenges are the basic physical conditions one needs in order to work from home. A suitable working environment should include basic needs such as a desk, suitable chair, computer, appropriate lighting, and a quiet place to work in. In July 2020, 74% of the workers reported that they have experienced difficulties. 34% reported suffering from the lack of face-to-face interaction. 33% reported a lack of equipment or office furniture or a lack of quiet workspace. About 1/5 workers had to share a computer with other members of their households, and 16% had problems with the internet. Did they have any support from their employers? The employers needed time to adjust as well. On December, we asked what kind of support did you receive from your workplace, if any? It was a multi-choice question. Around half of working from home employees did not get any assistance from their employers. 37% reported that they were provided with a laptop, 13% with other technological equipment, and 10% with a special interface for communicating with their colleagues or managers. Only 2% reported having been provided with a Wi-Fi connection or upgrade, or receiving compensation for their expenses in working from home. There are many interesting findings, but there is not enough time to cover it all. As we saw, there was a certainly work from home revolution in Israel during COVID. The question is, will it be maintained and contribute to a stronger and more efficient market? In order to take advantage of this form of work, as well as from this unexpected crisis, important measures must be taken. Workers do wish to work from home part of the week, but they need a personal contact and a suitable work environment. It should be with one eye on growth and one eye on the well-being of the workers, making sure that they have the right conditions and that work-life balance is not being violated. In addition, our findings indicate that there are inequalities to be addressed by policymakers. Weaker population groups were in a greater risk of losing their jobs during the pandemic. For a more resilient labor market, these groups are needed to be trained for the jobs of the future. As of the local authority level, in the context of smart cities, there is also work to be done. Cities can take upon themselves the role to ensure that residents can work remotely by, for example, providing workstations to certain populations. In order to make work from home common and easy to practice, it is necessary to update labor legislation, improve internet infrastructure, train workers and managers to manage their time and to use digital tools, to assist businesses financially with adapting technology, and to develop assessment methods when working from home. The revolution is here and it's right. So let's make the best of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We've heard a lot about how COVID has accelerated the digital divide between people, and further, created a spread based on income and education. And when you lay it out in those graphs and charts that way, it's very powerful. And when you really think about how it breaks down by industry, I think it helps a lot of us who are on this call really think about not only our own businesses and how we are functioning as professionals, but as real estate professionals, what that means for the types of assets we want to invest in, we want to develop in, who are our tenants, where is our workforce coming from, what are their travel patterns like? And so I thought your study was really compelling in helping categorize it in a very visual way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Lederman, I've heard you're a rock star and that I would be one of your biggest fans. So I'm just going to say that and look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot. I guess this is not my presentation. Maybe we can do some adjustment. So let me first of all thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this conference. It is great to make new friends in this time in the area of real estate. Can we put the presentation on, Ravid?
It's with Einat, and she's working on it. Just a minute.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to commend the previous speakers, although they left very little for me to add. I will say that my view is going to be the standpoint of a macroeconomist, and thanks very much. And so this is how Danny and I decided to call my very brief remarks macroeconomics perspective. I believe that the post-COVID-19 sample is so small. Let us remind ourselves, only by the end of 2020, we saw Pfizer get the FDA approval for the vaccine, and practically, for example, in Israel, we sort of eliminated a large part of the last lockdown only by the end of January or maybe mid-February of this year. So it is still a bit early to reach final conclusions, but having said that, of course, we should be asking all the questions that are being asked this morning. So turning to the next page, I would like to very briefly develop what I consider to be the bottom line of my main arguments. Again, this is not based on any statistical study or any data, but if Danny mentioned before Robert Schiller, this will be more a narrative approach to the issue based on lots of conversations that I have and I had with business managers, with experts in real estate and so on, especially in Israel, but also in Europe. So if we can move on to the first point, please. Actually, please, can you put all the points so that I can see them, the whole slide, if possible? Is it okay to do return and do?
Einat?
Yes, I don't see the whole slide.
Just press.
תעשי enter, ועוד פעם enter, ועוד פעם enter.
I'm doing it. It doesn't show.
Thank you. Thank
Or
you.
use the mouse. Just click on the mouse.
All right.
Okay, תשימי את כולם, יופי. Okay, so sorry for this small technical adjustment. So I think that the first point, as a macroeconomist, we have to remember that the initial conditions before COVID-19 and during COVID-19 and nowadays featured a significant expansion of the real estate sector in the United States and in Israel. And the second point is that a lot of that expansion has to do with extremely low interest rates that, if persistent, will continue supporting the sector. Now, I'm not particularly in support these days of the policies undertaken by the Federal Reserve. Especially, I very much agree with Professor Larry Summers' criticism of the policy by the Fed, in the sense that there is some degree of complacency when the Fed is announcing to everyone that monetary policy will continue to be with very low interest rates, even if inflation picks up to some degree, and that we should not expect any change in the monetary policy stance for the next year or maybe 2 years. Now, the issue is that while the Fed is continuously focused on CPI inflation, on inflation defined by the consumer price index increase, as we know, there is another phenomenon taking place in parallel, and this is asset price inflation. And asset price inflation takes the form of increases in prices of stocks, of bonds, of real estate, and even cryptocurrencies. Now, the world that we live in nowadays is a world in which real interest rates are negative. Expected real interest rates are negative, not only for the short term, but also for the medium and long term. A 10-year US Treasury yields a rate of return that is much lower than the expected rate of inflation over 10 years. And the same is true for Israel. So are we in a sort of a normal or abnormal situation where the US is a growing economy, Israel is a growing economy, and so on and so forth? The labor market is improving in all places, and yet central banks are sort of quite behind the curve in some sense in terms of their adjustment of monetary policy to the conditions in the real economy. True, the labor market has not gotten back to full employment or to the employment rate that prevailed before COVID-19. But if the labor market is not back to full employment, it is not due to interest rates. And maintaining low interest rates at this point is not something that is going to help. I think there is plenty of research to suggest that the labor market is undergoing tremendous technological and structural changes. Robotization, digitalization, the fourth industrial revolution, and so on and so forth. Things that got accelerated with COVID-19. So I guess what I'm saying is, when we are judging the trends of even the trends that we are discussing this morning, we have to take into account what is the background music, and to take into account that that background music may not persist for the long term, where I cannot define what is the long term. Of course, in the third point, also some segments of commercial real estate have been subject to structural changes already before COVID-19. For example, e-commerce, retail, and so on and so forth. I mean, we have seen many stores, many chains of stores close their shops on 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, in the center of Tel Aviv, and so on and so forth. So this is also a process that is sort of built on top of what we are discussing today. Now, there can be no doubt that COVID-19 has accelerated other structural changes, like, for example, work from home. I think that the idea of working from home is not a new idea, but certainly it got accelerated by what we have seen since COVID-19. Now, of course, the initial intuition is to say that the impact effect of working from home could be a reduction in the demand for office space. I mean, if not every employee will come to the office every single day of the week, maybe you need less office space. Now, I can tell you that in speaking to business managers, I find a lot of sort of uncertainty and a lot of confusion about what should be the right strategy at this point in time. And I think people want to accumulate more information. In other words, I have not seen major companies in Israel say, okay, now people are going to work 1 or 2 days a week from home, and therefore we are going to reduce office space by A, B, C. We are in a learning process. And again, this is all very new. This is all very new because of the development of the vaccination process and the development of the lifting of the lockdowns and so on and so forth. At the same time, it may be, I put this as a conjecture, that there has been a little bit of an overshooting of the thinking about working from home. And I fully agree with the previous speakers that working from home is here to stay. There can be no doubt. But the degree and the exact quantification of the role of working from home, I think remains to be determined. And one very interesting phenomenon is indeed the phenomenon of some signs of growing fatigue from some employees that that are very happy to go back to work and to meet again with their colleagues and to be in meetings face to face and do some brainstorming and things like that. And you know, this includes even the high-tech sector. My sort of thinking was that maybe in Israel, being a startup nation, many startups will say, well, of course, working from home, 100% and so on. And even there, you find that people do want to get together. They need space. Maybe they don't need the office, but they need space. You know, this is another, I guess, distinction that maybe is part of the new reality, the distinction between an office and space. And they want the space maybe on the way from their suburb where they live to the center of Tel Aviv to meet and maybe on a regular basis. In any case, I guess the old work mode of headquarters of companies and large companies having this huge building in downtown and everybody is flowing there in the morning and everybody is flowing to the metro or to the subway at the end of the day and high road congestion, I think this model is out. And definitely even headquarters are now being disintegrated into maybe mini units that can be distributed geographically among different parts of a given state, like New Jersey, or around the city, like Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. So as it says in the next point, work from home is here to stay, but the exact form will depend on the sector of activity. This is something that my colleagues before stressed, and other characteristics. I want to add another perspective as a macroeconomist. Working from home makes the assumption that you are working, okay? Some people, as a result of the post-COVID-19 and the fourth industrial revolution and technological revolution, are going to be left out without a job. And the research in labor economics indicates that the portion of the population with the largest vulnerability are the middle income type of occupations and the medium skill type of occupations. For the high-tech engineers, there is always going to be demand under current and future conditions. But you know, this is the very well-known phenomenon of the polarization of the labor market. You know, the labor market where those that are doing and were doing some sort of routine work, these people are probably to be crowded out by robots or by digital processes and so on and so forth. And it is quite sad from a social perspective that these people are not those that are the most likely to be working from home, because these are not the high-skilled people with the flexibility that will enable them to become all of a sudden independent advisors or independent consultants and so on and so forth. So this is something we will have to take into account in the macro perspective. I completely agree that that there should be an increase in the demand for housing in the suburbs. If I look at Tel Aviv, traffic in Tel Aviv is unbearable. It is really very, very difficult. And we have a very important problem here that the Al Rob Institute at Tel Aviv University is always stressing: the lack of proper public transportation in Israel. We have a problem of very bad infrastructure here in terms of and the use of public transportation. We don't have a metro system in the metropolitan areas like Tel Aviv, and therefore this is even more of an exponential problem here in Tel Aviv, increasing the temptation for people, for workers, to try to be working from home. So let me sum up. And I'll show you two graphs that are quite obvious to everybody. I think it is too early to reach decisive conclusions. Even the decision makers, business managers, have not laid out yet a a clear strategy ahead, and maybe meetings like the one this morning can help people in the business sector reach better decisions. The way I see working from home is part of a transition process. This is part of a transition process of the labor market, of the real estate market, of the whole economy, both to the post-COVID world, but also to the new world of technology. And so I think this is the way we should analyze this as not something that will generate any major breakthrough from the month of May to the month of December this year, but it is a process, and I think it, for us as researchers, it gives us a lot of sort of challenges and opportunities. If we turn to the next slide, I took this from some of the companies where I received some material from. So from Hoya Capital Real Estate, of course, the idea that housing continues to lead the recovery. The same is true in Israel for reasons that were developed before. And we have, as Danny mentioned before, the problem we have in Israel of excess demand for housing. The US, for demographic reasons and for other reasons, is on the same narrative, and therefore, true, there may be some bubblish elements in prices, but on the other hand, there is a structural factor of excess demand, which makes it very difficult to disentangle which part of the increase in prices is due to maybe a purely speculative factor and which part is due to the fundamental excess demand. And the next one, and the last one, please, the next slide shows on the left-hand side, you can see the IMF publishes, the International Monetary Fund, a global real house price index. So it is, of course, a net of inflation. And we can see that global housing markets are nowadays at levels that have not been even in the context of the subprime crisis of 2008. And on the right-hand side, also from the IMF, we can see how real commercial real estate prices in countries like the United States and Sweden have almost doubled since their low levels of 2009. So let me stop here, and I look forward to any discussion, comments, and so on. Thanks very much for your patience and your attention.
Thank you. So, it's really it's a tale of two worlds in New Jersey, that if you didn't know COVID was happening, you wouldn't know, because the real estate market here is so robust. And we're in a place where, with very low interest rates, capital is pouring into the space. And I think you all have referenced this, the work from home format is here, but a lot of us are ready and eager to get back to our lives, and we're going about our day. So how is it that we go about our day? I'd like to show a little video related to Ralph's project in Bell Works, and then lead into a little bit of a discussion with Ralph on his Bell Works project. Give me 1 second.
My name is Ralph Zucker, and I'm the developer of Bell Works. Bell Works is built on people. It's built around the idea of serendipitous encounters, bringing people together. It's all about you, the community, the people, life, living at work, working inspired. 2020 was a tough year. It forced us apart. It slowed things down here at Bell Works, and yet even a pandemic couldn't keep us apart.
I'm Paula Zamudio. I'm the founder of NPZ Style and Decor. I'm also the creative director at Bell Works and the lead designer. When the pandemic happened, we wanted to stay open. We worked so hard with the Bell Works team, my team, to continue keeping the space inspiring. We wanted to educate people and kept the Bell Works brand positive.
Hi, I'm Pat Garofolo. I'm the Senior Property Manager at Bell Works. Our major concern going through the COVID was really the safety of our tenants, our visitors and our guests, and we took measures that really ensured people's safety and gave them a comfort level when they came back to Bellworks. We put the motion sensors up. You didn't have to touch any doors. You didn't have to touch a door going into the bathroom. We increased ventilation. We put in extra filtration systems in.
We also were able to provide experiences to our community like the drive-in theater, dancing, culture, art.
Robert Feinberg, Chief Operating Officer. I can tell you it was a very challenging year for all of us, including our Bellworks team, but we did our best and we are looking forward to a great 2021.
Throughout the last few months of 2020, we have constantly seen how people kept coming back, and we're so grateful for all of you who chose to make Bellworks the place to be. We're looking forward to a year where we can shed our fears, where we can get back together again, where we can once again live, laugh, play, work, inspire.
So with that, I'd like to introduce Ralph Zucker, who's a dear friend, colleague. We've worked together, we've dined together, we're on the New Jersey Israel Commission together. Ralph, give us a little bit of an overview about Bellworks. And I'd like you to weave in some discussion, start off with the tenant perspective, as you tell us about this massive redevelopment you've undertaken.
Sure, thank you very much. And it's good to be among a lot of friends. I know the time is late, so I'll say hellos later, but I must thank Deb for putting this together and all the hard work. The idea of Bellworks was created obviously pre-pandemic, and I must say that the pandemic in an odd way has, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart, and it really has highlighted our strengths. Bellworks is an adaptation of the former Bell Labs, a world famous 2 million square foot edifice that was zoned into obsolescence. Work pattern changed. Let's talk about work patterns that changed back in the 80s, 90s, as people were free to move about their cabin and free to move about their life without being tethered to their desk and a large mainframe or even a PC. Work patterns started to shift, and that led to this 2 million square foot building being basically obsolete. At the same time, we recognized that people still, even in suburbia, we speak about Tel Aviv, we speak about Boston, we speak about Manhattan and the financial district, but even in suburbia, people want an urban vibe, an urban cool, an urban comfort. We created a concept that we now call a metroverb, a metropolis suburbia. And if you think about it, it's a compact, walkable community, a walkable area that has everything you need in life. It has residential, it has hospitality, it has health, wellness, fitness. It's an inspiring place to work. It's a place to cross-pollinate, to collaborate, to get together, to see your colleagues. And yet, it's not in a downtown. It's close to home, it's close to suburbs, it's easy to get to. So it's a metropolis, but in a suburban location. And as we're here today, and Deb asked me to talk about the perspective of tenants, I'm really in Professor Letterman's corner. I think we've overshot the concept of everybody's gonna work from home forever. People still need to ideate. They need to talk to each other. They need to be inspired. But I do agree, and my tenants seem to agree, and I'll talk about our tenant experience, that the fact is people are not going to be working in the office as much, but they're still going to need an office to come to. So I'm going to start the tenant perspective backwards. Let's talk with the people that we're dealing with now. Again, we have 1.2 million square feet of office, 1.2 million square feet of office, and we're almost 90% leased. Let me fill you in on the activity that we're seeing today. I think we're sitting at the epicenter of suburban New Jersey office market. And what we're seeing is, and we've heard a lot about this, and I can report from the field, so to speak, we're seeing a lot of things. First of all, we're seeing confusion and uncertainty. Companies that pre-pandemic were looking for 70, 100,000 square feet are now unsure Do we need 10,000 feet, 25,000? They need optionality. They can't lock themselves in to a 10, 12, 16-year lease that's going to tie them into a specific square footage. They don't even know who's coming back to work. And by the way, sidebar comment, it's amazing to me how much the employees have taken over the reins. How many companies are literally fearful of saying to their employees, listen, once you get that shot and you're double vaccinated and the restrictions are lifted, you better be in the office Monday morning. They're not going to say that because today the employees have the power. They are able to say, hey, I'm not coming to work, and if you don't like it, I'm going to find somebody else who's going to employ me. It's an employees marketplace. That is also a dynamic that right now is playing into this. At the same time, employers are able to say to their employees, you got to show up sooner or later. There's a saying going around, if you want a job, work from home. But if you want a career, you should show up in the office. And we are going to have a landing space. Their communities, their offices are building communities. We're looking at office design that is shifting from cubicle after cubicle after cubicle, or even the newer modern hoteling of employees. And it's shifting to creating spaces where people can come together. So I'll give you a case study. A company that we were talking to literally January, February, and into March of last year, as the pandemic was starting to hit. And we have a 72,000 square foot space. The lease was ready. The signature page was there. This is a tech company. Obviously, I can't name them. They even have an office in Israel or two, but a tech company. And this was going to be their US headquarters. They were downsizing already from 350,000 square feet to 72,000 square feet, pre-pandemic. Pandemic hits, they can't sign the lease, obviously. And just 2 months ago, we re-engaged with them. And now, this same headquarters, they're not sure if it's going to be 18,000 square feet or 25,000 square feet, and they're not sure how long they could sign a lease for. One thing they know is they need flexibility, and the design has so few desks, and it's very much collaborative spaces, places where people can come in, they can put themselves down, and they can ideate, they can share ideas. We're seeing that over and over and over again. At BellWorks, we've introduced 4, let's call them an ecosystem of offices. We have the quote unquote, the WeWorks, the co-working model, our own collab, which is our entry level. You can take a desk for an hour. We have something we call ready-to-wear offices, pret-a-porter, ready-to-wear offices, which are, 500 square feet, 1,000 square feet, up to 3,000 square feet of office spaces that you can lease, and it's easy to lease, easy to occupy, and easy to leave. That's pre-pandemic. Then we had our 4th tier, which is the typical build to suit. Office comes in, company comes in, they look for an office, they're looking to they have to hire architects and designers and build it out, and the whole yada, yada, yada. It takes years to set it up, and it's typically a 10 to a 16-year lease. We've now introduced a middle tier, a 3rd tier, that we're calling Campus. Campus at BellWorks. It's between 5 to 25,000 square feet. It's flexible. You can take it for 3 to 5 years. You can expand, you can contract, allowing companies to come in and take advantage of an ecosystem. We may need a few more desks. We'll go to the co-working space. We may need an office for half a year for a team. We'll lease, if it's available, a ready-to-wear office. And we may need to come here permanently, but companies need flexibility. So in short, the user experience that we're seeing, the tenant experience at BellWorks, is flexibility. They no longer want to spend all that time and money on their real estate. They want to focus on their workers. One thing that became highlighted, companies want to focus on their core competency. They don't want to build out these edifices. They don't need the lobby and the conference rooms and everything. They just want a place to come together. And they need it closer to home. They want to have people talking about the hub spoke. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is, but they want to have smaller scattered offices closer to home. So in short, what we're seeing is an effect on design, we're seeing an effect on location, and we're seeing an effect on terms.
It also seems like, Ralph, it also seems like it's forcing a much more day-to-day interaction between landlord and tenant than you might normally want or have historically expected.
Oh, for sure. We're now getting into the managing of their space in terms of, let's say you have an office that's supposed to serve 300 regional employees, but they're not all coming in on the same day. Tenants are looking to us through our systems. We have Yardi system for our co-working space to manage their own space, manage their connectivity, manage their desks so that their employees know what's available. So really that's what it's all about. I do not believe that we're going to see the total demise of the office. I agree with what Professor Davis said earlier on. You're going to see a shift. I hope it's right because I'm in suburban office real estate. So Professor Davis, let's hope you're right. I think we're seeing that on the ground. We're actually seeing our rents, our asking rents, and even the rents we're getting have increased by probably 10% since the start of the pandemic. So we're seeing a net positive effect on our absorption.
As a developer, right, you're taking on a similar project for Bellworks in Chicago. So with what you've learned from COVID and now understanding the different type of relationship and lease term and negotiation that has to happen, how have you pivoted as a developer in Chicago, either in your underwriting, in your management, in your marketing, in your designing? Are there tangible business decisions that you've had to say, yes, we're in this transitional space, but this is something that I, as a developer, am going to incorporate into my model?
Yeah, so in Chicago, we call it Bellworks Chicagoland, and everybody's invited to go on our website afterwards and just tap in bell.works. You'll see both locations. Bellworks Chicagoland, we had a pivotal moment. Last April, we were still in the beginnings of construction or reconstruction, also a 1.6 million square foot former AT&T Ameritech Baby Bell complex in suburban Chicago, similar to Bell Labs. And we had to make a decision. Do we go forward or do we stop or do we abandon almost? And we decided to go forward because we expected exactly what we're seeing now. We expected suburban real estate to actually become more attractive. What we've decided to do over there was accelerated a residential component. So we're already submitted site plans for residential around this metro burb. And we've also fully built out our co-working and ready-to-wear spaces during the pandemic. So a few weeks ago, we had the ribbon cutting on CoLab Chicagoland, Bellworks Chicagoland, and our ready-to-wear spaces. And we already have, I believe it's 7 tenants in that space. Other than that, we're introducing campus into Bellworks Chicagoland, and we're seeing a lot of activity in the marketplace. But we were very well positioned. I'll give you a little vignette, Deb, and everybody else. Now, we have a tenant here. I don't know if I should name the name, but they're a large life insurance company. And they have a location in Manhattan, in Hudson Yards. And they have a location here at Bellworks, almost 100,000 square feet. And of course, both of those locations have been empty since the beginning of the pandemic. They expect to come back sometime in July. What they've told us is that they don't know when they're going to be able to reoccupy their Hudson Yards, Midtown Manhattan location because of the elevators, because of the commute, because of all the fear of people almost to get, just to occupy the building, with today's social distancing rules, to go up and down an elevator to the 50th floor or 52nd floor will take them about an hour and a half to 2 hours out of their day, just going up and down. In a suburban office in Bellworks, you could come in, you could walk up the stairs to your office. So they're going to see a shift of employees from their Midtown location to their suburban location. So that's had an effect on everything.
So let me shift to suburbs for 1 second, as a tail onto something that Professor Liederman mentioned in terms of transportation. So you're developing a mixed-use community in Somerville, which the premise of the density that was zoned there and approved there was based on the Gateway Tunnel and mass commuting into Manhattan. So talk a little bit about, how you see the shift into suburbia and what that means in terms of transportation needs and what that's looking like for you in the context of your new urbanism model, and all the things we've talked about earlier.
Great. So in Somerville, we're building about a little over 700, a mix of multifamily and for sale residential. We're doing that together with Avalon Bay communities and also with Pulte Homes. So Somerset typically acts as a master developer, which is what we've done there. And the fact is that we do have a concern because a big linchpin of that particular project is, and just for the education of everybody here, we took a parking lot that surrounded a train station. So the Somerville train station, we took the parking lot, put the parking into a stacked deck that is almost completely being built, and used the excess real estate to wrap the station with residential and some retail. So great planning, everything is perfect, except for the fact that people no longer are lining up to take the train into Manhattan. So we now are the proud owners of a 500 and something parking car garage that we are frankly quite concerned as to whether or not we're going to be able to utilize it properly for the, for parking. And is it going to, and if nobody parks there, it's obviously a financial hit. So other than that, we're seeing the residential component through the roof. Starts are much higher, even though the prices of lumber and materials have escalated. The price of housing has escalated even more. So on the housing side, it's great, but the whole premise of commuting to the city, quote unquote, it's questionable.
So I'm going to close with this question to you. And if there are any questions from the audience, please feel free. I know we're running late on time. I'm going to pose this to you. And then if any of the other panelists want to chime in, what are your thoughts? Are there any policies, positions, or practices that as a developer, you feel that you'd like to see the state or government focus on to help us get through this transitional period of coming out of the pandemic, recognizing kind of where we are in the economic cycle? What's a policy or a position that might be able to help make sense and bring us a little bit back to some sense of normal transactions?
So great point. And actually it's a conversation I had a little bit with Andrew Gross a few weeks ago. I tend to think of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, that had a huge effect on the accessibility in the workplace. And if you think about it, we are really so much superior in our abilities, technologically speaking, compared to the systems that we have in our buildings today. So talk about safe buildings, talk about creating safe work environments. We can do so much better. But the marketplace doesn't demand it. And sometimes government should step in. And I find it weird that I should be saying the government should step into anything. But at the same time, I do believe that it's time for another round of legislation led by practical demands on safe work environments, the right amount of air, the right filters, and everybody should be required. It should be phased in, but it's necessary so that, God forbid, next time, when or if a pandemic hits, and I think we know it's going to happen again sooner or later, rather than have this fear where the only thing between us and a disaster is a 99-cent mask that we don't know if we're supposed to put on or not supposed to put on. Maybe we flick a switch in the office. Maybe there's a way to have that filtration full time. And by the way, we've learned how few people got the flu when people did this. So think about the productivity. So creating a safer environment at work is something that the government should focus on. It would be great, the great minds here between Tel Aviv and New Jersey, Israel and New Jersey, put our heads together, come up with some good suggestions to government to create and to lead in this direction. I think it would be well time and money well spent.
Excellent. Thank you. I have one question that just came in. I'm going to punt this to Morris, given this was the context of his presentation. You presented that experts are saying that pre-pandemic we were about 5% work from home, but the expectation is a 3 to 4 time increase post-pandemic. So what are the experts? Are they defining what a hybrid schedule looks like?
I haven't seen any data on what a hybrid schedule looked like. I have the same anecdotes that you do. My neighbors that work in Manhattan that used to go in 5 days a week, they're saying, I'm never doing that again. I'm either taking every Monday and every Friday off, or I'm going to make it 3 days a week. That's just an anecdote. So I don't know. And in fact, it's a great question. And I think, if everyone works the same 3 days per week, it's not totally clear how that affects the demand for office space. If we stagger with the days we don't work and do work, then we can shrink the amount of office space we need. But if everyone comes in Tuesday and through Thursday, maybe we need the same amount of office space, but it's vacant 4 days a week or 5 days a week now. So these are tough questions. I don't know.
Any of the other panelists have any? I thought Ralph's response in terms of policy was a very compelling one. As a developer, it's a lot easier for me to think about HVAC systems and filtration than fighting state policy on sea level rise, which is equally important but has its own ramifications. Are there any other panelists with any other thoughts on policy initiatives that should be considered?
Can I volunteer one?
Please.
I think if we're going to work from home more, we need more robust systems in place that can respond to storms from climate change. We can't have power going out after every storm if we expect to continue to be productive from home. So I think we need more robust water, sewer, electrical systems.
Fantastic. If there's no other comments or questions from the audience, I thought this was a wonderful collaboration. It's good to see all of you. We keep coming upon a transportation comment in these, so I think our group is challenged to figure out what that next forum looks like. But I look forward to seeing all of you at our next forum. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.